Good evening. Hi, I'm Max Rudin, President and Publisher of Library of America, and welcome to the exciting third season of LOA Live. Library of America is a nonprofit organization dedicated to publishing authoritative new volumes of great American writers and to keeping our many-voiced literary tradition a vital part of the culture. A special welcome to Library of America fellows and members who support our nonprofit mission. 2022 is Library of America's 40th anniversary year, which we're celebrating with events like this one. Please check our website, loa.org/events for updates. Tonight's special edition of LOA Live welcomes a remarkable gathering of guests to celebrate Oscar-Hijuelos, whose novels brought the Cuban American immigrant experience into the heart of American literature. Buoyant expectations for life in the new country, poignant struggles, and sometimes miraculously brief but fabulous triumphs. All these are woven with intense yearning for a vanished Cuban past, or some other impossibly beautiful place where love never dies and loss, pain, and regret shall cease from troubling. Each book as rich, radiant, haunting, and heartbreaking as the bolero at the center of his most famous work. A new volume in Library of America, volume number 362 in the series, gathers 3 novels: Our House in the Last World, The Mambo Kings Play Songs of Love, and Mr. Ives' Christmas. It is edited by Laurie Carlson-Hijuelos and Laura Alonso-Gallo, who join us tonight. A link to the book will be dropped in the chat. The LOA Hijuelos edition is available for endowment through the Guardians of American Letters Fund to keep it permanently in print. For details, visit loa.org/support or send us an email. Special thanks to our promotional partners for this program: the Association of Literary Scholars, Critics, and Writers, Casa Cuba at Florida International University, and Hispanic Notes. I'd also like to acknowledge 3 people on our audience this evening whose key roles in Oscar's literary career and legacy are described in the chronology to the LOA edition. His friend and colleague, David Unger, Karen Braziller, the editor and publisher who, with her husband Michael, took a chance on his first novel, Our House in the Last World, and Jonathan Galassi, who edited his Pulitzer Prize-winning masterpiece, Mambo Kings, for Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. All readers of Hijuelos owe the 3 of you a tremendous debt of gratitude. Tonight, 7 friends and colleagues honor, celebrate, and thank Oscar-Hijuelos with a brief program of readings, appreciation, reminiscence, and storytelling. We'll hear, in order of appearance, from Laurie Anderson, Junot Díaz, Gay Talese, Mary Gordon, Arturo O'Farrell, Laura Alonso-Gallo, and Laurie Carlson-Hijuelos. We invite you to share your own comments and stories in the Q&A box. The Q&A button is on your menu bar. Please let us know where you're viewing from. And now, please welcome Laurie Anderson.
Hello, I'm Laurie Anderson, and I'm so happy to be here with you for the celebration of our friend Oscar. And I'm thinking of him now playing his guitar. And Oscar used to come over to our house a lot to watch boxing. And he and Lou would sit on this long, curved, sort of purple couch, sort of these fancy twisted metal railings. And they both had these very large blonde acoustic guitars that made them both look like a lot smaller than they actually were. And they were like smoking Cuban cigars like nonstop. You could really hardly see them with all of the smoke. And the TV was on because Oscar had come over to watch the fight. And they were hunched over their guitars in this cloud of smoke. Out of this cloud, once in a while came these like blues riffs, and once in a while like flamenco phrases that phased into a rock riff and then into a country riff. And they were both practicing classical finger picking. And they were really serious about that. And they would trade licks and they'd compare each other's fingerings, do it like this, do it like that. And the boxing match was always on. So there's all these kind of sounds of slapping and clubbing and grunting. And once in a while, both of them would just sort of start to shriek because they had that same fantastic like cackle that kind of ramped up into a maniacal howl. But anyway, Oscar loved music. And so I'm going to read something about drums from Mambo Kings. And now nothing but drums, battery of drums, the conga drums jamming out in a descarga, the drummers lifting their heads, shaking under some kind of like spell. There's rain drums, like pitter patter, about 100 times faster, and then slamming the door drums and dropping the bucket drums, kicking the car fender drums, then circus drums, then coconuts falling out of the trees, and something against the ground drums, and then these like lion skin drums, and then then the whacking of a hand against the wall drums, and the beating of a pillow drums, and heavy stones against a wall drums, then the thickest forest tree trunks pounding drums, and then the mountain rumble drums, and then the little birds learning to fly drums, and then the big birds alighting on a rooftop and fanning their immense wings drums, then a boat down the river with oars dropping heavily into the water drums, then a man fucking a woman and jamming the bed frame into the wall drums, and then someone jumping up and down on the floor drums, and then a fat man slapping his own belly drums, and then a woman smacking her ass down on the floor drums, and then Morse code drums, and then the sky breaking up and all the heavens falling down drums, and then like dialogue drums, and the children running through an empty church drums, and a conquistador firing cannons at an Indian village drums, that slaves being thrown into the hold of a ship drums, and then the beating pots and pans drums, and then the lightning drums, and then an elephant rolling on a ground drums, and then heartbeat drums, a honeybird drone drums, and a couple more hundred drums. Anyway, I really love this this passage from Mambo Kings, and I loved Oscar so much. So I wanted to thank him for being such a wonderful writer and such a wonderful friend. That's it for me.
Hello, I think I'm on here, but hello. My name is Junot Díaz. It's a tremendous honor to be here. Hello, hi everyone. My name is Junot Díaz. Tremendous honor to be here. I wanted to thank, of course, the Library of America and all my fellow panelists, and of course, Laurie. Thank you so much. Again, I'm an enormous fan of Oscar-Hijuelos. Though a fan probably doesn't get to the core of how important Oscar is to me and his work was to me. And I'm actually going to read from Our House in the Last World, a book which in many ways was a great source of inspiration. We all as writers have our kind of guiding light. We have these constellations that lead us through the confusion and the obscurity of this whole artistic process. And among the brightest of the lights for me was Oscar-Hijuelos. And I've got to tell you, there's a couple things which I don't think I've ever aren't said enough about Oscar, which is, of course, I don't know a more sort of exacting or a more important chronicler of the thickness of immigrant family love, and a thick love in the terms of, in the words of Toni Morrison, that is both sustaining and really, really perilous, and really just an important aspect of not only the immigrant experience, but many experiences. And but the other thing about Oscar is that you know, a lot of his books are, as you know, set in the past, and really just one of the most remarkable world builders, because you don't set books in the 40s and 50s without having an incredible talent for world building. And the piece that I'm going to read is from Our House in the Last World, just a tiny aspect, just a tiny fragment, and really just how he sets this world that he's going to be wrestling with. It's going to haunt this book, a world just limned with nostalgia and longing. And it's just a paragraph, and it goes, "Life was quiet in Holguin. The world was different then. People believed in God, and children died at early ages of the fever and tuberculosis. Saints and angels walked in gardens. The living called to the dead through spiritualists. Horses were left dead in the streets, and honking automobiles frightened swarms of birds off the treetops. Priests were respected, and there were very few robberies, especially in Mercedes town. And the poor were provided for by charities and fed with scraps of food given out after the last meal of the day. People were more polite, more elegant, and they liked to go promenading in the park on sunny afternoons. Because people died more easily, there was more praying, and there were more funerals, which twisted through the streets with coachmen and pallbearers dressed in long black robes and wide three-cornered hats, and everyone but everyone knew one another's name and gave greetings as they passed. In those days, Mercedes was a little girl with a Cleopatra hairdo and a red ribbon in her hair." And so clear that this kind of nostalgic vision is going to be skewered by the rest of the book. But anyway, that's all. Thank you so much, and what a great honor.
Hello, I'm Gates Lease, and I'm a good friend of the late, great Oscar-Hijuelos. I knew him for so many years. It is rare when you know a writer through his work and like him even more in person. Writers are really not very nice people. I know many, many writers. Most writers write because they don't communicate in other ways so well. Oscar was a rare exception. He was a beautiful writer and a beautiful person. He was a sweet person. His writing is even, he's not damning of his characters. His characters are sweet-natured, they're kindly people, they're understanding, they're patient, they're tolerant. And all those things were true of Oscar-Hijuelos. I so treasure my friendship, my relationship with him, and my respect for him that endures to this day, almost 10 years since he died. I knew all of his novels. I read everything he wrote, and sometimes read it twice for double the admiration. I'm just going to read a little bit from Mambo Kings in a moment. But it was a Pulitzer book, but I don't think it was any better than all his other books. He had a high level of performance. Oscar did not give you bad work. What he published was his very best, and his very best was the very best. So now we're going to read a little bit from Mambo Kings. The brothers walked out in white suits, and with guitar and trumpet, bowed to the audience and nodded when Ricky Ricardo faced the orchestra and, holding a wand, prepared to begin, asking them, "Are you ready?" The older brother strummed an A minor chord, the key of the song. A harp swirled in as if it were the clouds of heaven. And then the bassist began to play habanera. And then the piano and horns played a 4-chord vamp. Standing side by side before the microphone, brows creased in concentration, expression sincere, the brothers began to sing that romantic bolero, "Beautiful Maria of My Soul," a song about love so far away it hurts, a song about lost pleasures, a song about youth, a song about love so elusive a man can never know where he stands, a song about wanting a woman so much death does not frighten you, a song about wanting that woman even when she has abandoned you. As Caesar sang, his vocal cords trembling, he seemed to be watching something profoundly beautiful and painful happening in the distance. Eyes passionate, imploring, his earnest expression asking, "Can you see who I am?" But the younger brother's eyes were closed and his head was tilted back. He looked like a man on the verge of falling through an eternal bliss of longing and solitude. Thank you, Oscar-Hijuelos.
Hi, my name is Mary Gordon, and I'm so happy to be here, so full of admiration for Oscar, and so grateful to be with this distinguished panel. I think I'm probably here to do the Catholic part, because it occurs to me that at the time that Oscar and I were first writing, there still aren't a lot of writers whose background was Catholic, but we were very different people. But I think we like to laugh together. We like to tell old stories, and I was a very great admirer of his work. And as I thought about what I'd like to say about him tonight, since I decided I'm going to read from Mr. Ives' Christmas. Two words planted themselves in my mind, both beginning with the letter M, mystic and master. And I thought about what Oscar's response would be if he heard me calling him a mystic. And I think he would laugh. And I think he would laugh that laugh of his that seemed brought up almost reluctantly from some distant, ragged place. Oscar-Hijuelos took the very great risk, and was a very great risk indeed in the 90s, to write entirely without irony, a mystical vision. In a moment of pure clarity that he would always remember, he began to feel euphoric, all the world's goodness, as it were, spinning around him. At the same time, he began to feel certain physical sensations. The sidewalk under him lifting ever so slightly, and the avenue dense with holiday traffic fluttering like an immense carpet and growing wider and stretching onward as if it would continue to do so forever, an ever-expanding river of life. And the skyscrapers that lined Madison Avenue, beginning with the Yam and Rubicon building just across the street with its stream of employees, began to waver, the buildings bowing as if to recognize Ives, bending as if the physical world were a grand joke. Then, not knowing whether to shout from ecstasy or fear, he looked up and saw the sun glowing red and many times its normal size, looming over the avenue, a pink and then flaring yellow corona bursting from it. And then in all directions, the very sky filled with four rushing, swirling winds, each defined by a different colored powder like strange Asian spices. One was cardinal red, one the color of saffron, another gray like mothwing, the last a brilliant violet. And then there came from four directions, spinning like a great pinwheel over Madison Avenue and 42nd Street, leaning back, nearly falling. Ives was on the verge of running for his life when, just like that, a great calm returned, the sun receding, the blue sky utterly tranquil. It's possible to have a mystical vision without being religious, if you define religion as having to do with doctrine or good behavior, which I do not, and I firmly believe Oscar did not. But the source and texture of both Edward Ives' mystical vision and Oscar-Hijuelos is inextricably linked to the imagery and sensibility of Catholicism. Whatever bad there is to say about Catholicism, and there's a lot, it is at its heart incarnational. That is to say, rooted in a belief that Jesus was both God and human, both flesh and spirit, and that to separate the two is a betrayal of Christianity itself. So the power of the passage I have just read stems from the vividness and richness of the physical world that his language invokes. If it was courageous in the 90s when irony was king to portray mystical vision, it was no less courageous to present a leading character as a good person. I thought of the good characters in fiction, Dostoevsky's Prince Mishkin, Henry James Isabel Archer, Kate Croy, Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Ramsay, Willa Cather's Antonia. And it occurred to me that Edward Ives has stood out among them in his enjoyment of the physical world, particularly his enjoyment of sex. Like other good characters in literature, Edward suffers and must endure, but unlike them, he has a history of physical pleasure. His is a goodness that is fully embodied. And among the great joys of Hijuelos' prose is his habit of listing, in their treasured particularity, a variety of objects and phenomena, from the parishioners at Christmas Mass to the contents of the office of a friend who creates images for billboards. And at the very end of the novel, in the midst of Ives' dream or vision of what he would buy his dead son for Christmas, a list of toy soldiers. Among the many wonderful examples of striking physical images, I was particularly struck by his description of Luis and his wife Carmen after Luis has returned from a bout of infidelity. Quote, humiliation had thinned their eyelids. And it is nothing less than a stroke of genius that when Edward finally meets the man who, as a hungry street punk, shot his son, Daniel Gomez, the murderer, weighs in at 300 pounds and is morbidly obese. Although Mr. Ives' Christmas is one of the saddest books I've ever read, it's not a difficult novel. And although it follows a long path of numbing grief, there is a velocity to the prose that, coupled with the pleasures of his physical description, carries the reader along on a wave. This is where the mastery in his masterpiece comes in. The lightness and velocity is made possible by the book's structure. It is written in a series of short takes, little chapters or chapterlets, each of them complete in itself, but flowing organically from the church scene at the beginning to the church scene at the end. The titles of these sections, and I'll give them just a few of them because they're so much fun, have a kind of ing quality to them that enables the book's propulsions. Here they are. You have to put it behind you. Certainly he would have been a printer. His mother's patience with men and a trip to the cloisters. The nature of those parties, what a cop handed Ives, things were in the air. Incidentally, was there a moon? Does it pay? The singular achievement of Mr. Ives' Christmas is its insistence on confronting the deepest and most unanswerable of questions without for 1 second or one phrase resorting to abstraction, culminating in an answer that is not an answer, but an opening for yet more unanswerable questions. What a great thing it is that the Library of America grants him his place among the immortals. Thank you very much.
Well, I gotta say, I really loved Oscar for so many reasons. First of all, he was an unrepentant smoker, a dedicated meatitarian. He was incredibly funny. Besides being a meatitarian and a dedicated smoker, he was known to enjoy his martini cocktails and all kinds of drinks. And so many things about him are interesting to me because my mother and father would have he and Laurie over to their house for these huge parties, and these parties are, I mean, incredible. We'd have people like Dizzy Gillespie and Tito Puente and Graciela, and somehow I was always drawn to Oscar, despite the presence of all these incredible people, because Oscar was truly, truly funny. He looked you in the eye and talked to you directly, which I thought was really interesting. In those parties, that wasn't always the case. He concentrated on you as he was talking to you, regardless of the level of inebriation. Just love that about him, that he would stare at you, know, and in a way that's reflected in his books. His books have plots, yes, they're incidental. his books are filled with incredible characters. His love of the people that he wrote about, his genuineness with them. These people were real characters. You remembered the human beings in his books. And so I'm going to read a little piece of a book called Dark Dude, because this book spoke to me. I remember growing up in the Upper West Side, and this speaks also to the other thing that Oscar-Hijuelos was. He was, besides an unrepentant smoker, loved to drink, and a dedicated meatitarian, he was always a genuine, bona fide, dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker. And this book takes place in the neighborhood that I know and love very much. Dark Dude, what a male of light skin is derisively called by persons of color. Colloquial Harlem, 1965-1970. A person considered suspect because of his light complexion, especially in criminal circumstances, someone who was not considered streetwise. A white person considered not to be hip, straight, uncool, an outsider, particularly in the context of ghetto society. I'm going to go right to chapter 2. My mom's was a brunette with skin somewhere between cinnamon and café con leche. Ditto for my chubby little sister Isabel. And my pops had wavy dark hair and brown eyes. Then there was me. Hazel eyes, blonde hair, fair skin, and freckles, for God's sake. The odd one out, and in glasses. My own cousins used to call me Blanquito and Pinky and other things too. I mean, my looks really got me in my face. As I moved along to my room, it was like I could still hear what visitors used to say when they saw me for the first time. Oh, what a cute, adorable white boy. Is he really your son? No me digas. But he looks so different from you. On top of that, I'd be thinking about something my mom once told me. Mama, I had asked her, how come I look so different? ¿Qué? She asked me in Spanish. Why am I so pale? Es nada, she told me. It's nothing. You're just lucky, that's all. Tienes que tener orgullo de ser tan blanco. You should be proud to be so white. But how did that happen? How? How does it matter? You'll have an easier time in life. But I wanted to know. So she went into a little act. If you must know, hijo, I found you in the garbage can in front of this very building. What? Rie, es un chiste, she said. Come on, laugh, it's a joke. Finally, when she saw that I didn't think it was so funny, she gave me the real rundown. It's very simple, she told me. One of your great-grandfathers was an Irishman, un irlandés. You have his blood, ¿me entiendes? I nodded as it made sense, imagining this blonde-haired Irishman 100 years ago stepping off a ship somewhere in Cuba and marrying into my family line. But I still wondered, why me and no one else? I thought about that stuff a lot, even when I didn't want to. You know, having come from an Irish background myself and understanding the different nuances that make up Cuba and the different races that are intermingled in our bloods, I would very proudly claim Oscar-Hijuelos and Laurie as a landsman, as people near and dear, close to my heart, and the privilege of being just the privilege of being here and being able to recall the great Oscar-Hijuelos is enough cause for rejoice. 2 other quick memories. I remember I was privileged to be asked to perform music at the wedding of Laurie and Oscar. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a beautiful church, and Oscar sat in with his guitar, and it was magical to me. I just thought it was amazing. The very last time I saw Oscar was at Darbar Bar and Grill. It's an Indian restaurant in the East 50s. And man, we just had such a good time that night. We had just such a good time. Smoking, drinking, hanging out, laughing, and always with such pure humor, much like my father, who was the Irishman that he was. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Library of America. And thank you to these incredible fellow panelists for having the opportunity to talk about my dear friend, Oscar-Hijuelos.
Hello, I am Laura Alonso-Gallo. I had the privilege of serving as co-editor of the new Library of America edition, Oscar-Hijuelos, The Mambo Kings and Other Novels. As Max mentioned earlier, Laurie and I included in the edition a chronology where readers can learn about the life and the literary career of Oscar-Hijuelos. I enjoyed so much working with Laurie working on this chronology, learning so much about this very special artist, writer, and man that I did not have the fortune of calling my friend, because I only saw him once and interviewed him once. But I am delighted to hear all those stories you're telling. I am going to try not to be too academic, sound too academic. I would like to share a passage from Mambo King's play Songs of Love that captures moments of joy and pride in the immigrant community in 1950s New York. Cesar and Nestor are in their mid-30s at this moment. Nestor is married to Dolores and has 2 children, while Cesar remains single, and he is, as we all know, an unflagging, womanizer. These they just toured the United States with the Mambo Kings Orchestra. They were excited about the extra money they made, and this particular passage is about the joy immigrants feel about prosperity. That instant of clarity when you know your efforts have paid off and feel the power of optimism in your veins. Simple things like buying presents for their family, endorsing their savings account, and having a car of their own. In this passage, we see a thoughtful and reserved Nestor, and we also see a generous and spirited Cesar. We all know that Cesar has been the focus of much criticism due to his machismo. In this passage, however, we meet another Cesar. We perceive another facet of Cesar's, a man who is proud for having brought prosperity to his family, a man who is affectionate and loyal to his brother Nestor, a man who is protective of his family and friends, and a man who lives life to the fullest. Let me read then. I am glad I do not have to work too hard on the thick accent. With all this money, the brothers brought themselves new suits, toys for the children, clothing. Nestor bought Dolores a fur wrap. For the apartment, he bought a brand new Castro convertible sofa and the big RCA black and white television that would sit in that living room for the next 20 years. And he was always making trips to the bank, putting money away for a rainy day. His security was his blue American Savings Bank passbook, guaranteed to pay 4 to 5% interest annually. Even Cesar, who always let the money fly out of his pockets, managed to put some of it away, though not much. He spent it at the racetracks and in the nightclubs and on his male and female acquaintances. For about 3 months, he lived a life of opulence. Even after sending a few $100s to his daughter in Cuba, whom he kept promising to visit, he had enough to make a down payment on his dream automobile, a 1956 DeSoto. The afternoons would find Cesar out on the street, proudly sponging down his DeSoto with soap and water and then polishing it with wax. Then he would wipe the chrome with rags until the whole machine gleamed radiantly. Cesar would go over the automobile as meticulously as he did his fingernails, with not a mark or a nick anywhere on its great windshield or over its smooth sloping hood. He derived great pleasure from looking at it and would hold court from its front seat, playing its radio and chatting quietly with his friends until he decided to take someone for a ride up to the George Washington Bridge and back. The thing was so big and shiny that he would attract crowds of poor children who would stand before it in awe. Yes, sir, Cesar would think, that's my nice car. He was always reluctant to leave it parked in front of the building without someone to watch over it. LaSalle was a street where the hoodlum element not only sat on cars, they took flying leaps off cars to catch balls during stickball games and jump up on top of cars to dance. He'd usually park it over in the garage on 126th Street, but sometimes kept it near the building. On those occasions, when he was called upstairs, he would often check out that car from the window. He loved his DeSoto. It was big. It was splendid. It was smooth. It had turbo thrust and was 15 feet long. It was so fabulous looking that no woman could resist smiling when she saw it. That DeSoto was so powerful that when he roared down the street and screeched to a halt, his foot on its touch-sensitive automatic brake system pedal, driver and machine were one, and he would feel as if he were turbo thrusting through the dense ordinariness of the world. Well, what do I like about Oscar-Hijuelos' work? What do I find fascinating? Many things. I am going to mention only a couple. For one, I love his elegant prose and his capacity and talent to create realistic social atmospheres, just like the one we have I just read, of past eras. In his novels, he gives readers a sound sense of history by bringing to the page urban landscapes, Havana, New York, it doesn't matter, values and mentalities, customs, fashion, films, celebrities, politicians, artists, and of course, music. I also admire his very personal use of memory. I think Junot Díaz's reading from Our House in the Last World connects with this. I think he actually, the use of memory becomes an artistic strategy. In his novels, characters simultaneously inhabit a past and a present. The past gravitates over the present with such energy that human existence is defined and understood by their past. A past that, despite the hardships, is always good, innocent, and kind. Lastly, like every good writer, Hijuelos invites readers to engage in existential questions that are timeless and that are universal, that relate to human identity, to mortality, family bonds, friendships, loneliness, success. When we read his work, we think about all of that. And we think about the fleeting happiness and about fate. I think it is in Mr. Ives Cried Christmas when we keep thinking why bad things happen to good people. In his novels, we find adversities and loss, but there's always that celebration of the joy of living and the joy of sharing, the gift of love, and of course, the power of music that saves us and comforts us and in many ways redeems us. from our flaws. And that's my take.
Hello, my name is Laurie Carlson-Hijuelos, and I'd like to share a few grace notes about my beloved husband, Oscar. Oscar was a man of many interests, passions, and sensibilities. He was complex, introspective, intellectual, spiritual, and sociable. Oscar loved comic books, and he collected them. This passion took hold of him when he was 8 years old. He had eclectic tastes, everything from Spider-Man to Raw to Little Lulu. Once, when I entered his studio in Connecticut to look for a book, I came upon him lying on the sofa with a comic book in his face. He quipped, "Laurie, some men read Playboy. I read Donald Duck." Oscar also collected lead soldiers and lead collectibles of Haida, Britton's, Bertuni, and Mignot trademarks. It is an enormous collection, thousands. His favorite subject in lead was Roman chariots, but he collected all sorts of lead figures, from farmers to camels to palm trees and jugglers. One of the sweetest things he did with these figures was to surprise and delight me with little tableaus of his making. Upon my pillow at night, he would arrange a little parade comprising of, for instance, a dapper lead soldier on horseback, a princess in her ermine cape, and a little pink bunny following behind. Oscar had an amazing capacity for amusement. He was tickled by small and large things alike. Once, when we were in England on vacation and staying in a country house hotel near the city of Bath, we arranged to have dinner in the hotel's dining room. We ordered appetizers and a main course. Oscar's first dish was a salad fashioned from the hotel's pristine emerald gardens. As he thrust his fork into the beautiful greens on his plate, out crawled a 2-inch shiny black bug. Oscar couldn't stop laughing. He had a penchant for socks with interesting designs and patterns. Oscar loved to swim. He could swim for hours, and he did so beautifully with elegant form. He especially enjoyed swimming in the bay of our home on the Connecticut shore, but he also appreciated the spectacular lake-like swimming pool at the Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables, Florida. Sometimes we booked a room at the Biltmore just so he could swim there. Johann Sebastian Bach was his favorite composer. He often played his music while he wrote, but he was enthralled by birdsong and church bells too. He was a self-taught guitarist. He cherished his guitars. He owned more than 7. He also enjoyed playing his version of jazz on the piano. His very favorite food was roast chicken. He ate it with gusto. Yet he liked my Moroccan chicken tagine with olives and lemons just as much. He couldn't live without chocolate. His favorite chocolate shop was Mondel's on Broadway and 114th Street. He sent my parents a 2-pound box of chocolates every month. He was generous to a fault. He was a gentleman through and through. An example of the latter. Once, While we were in Edinburgh, Scotland, sitting on a park bench and enjoying the view of Edinburgh Castle, Oscar saw a young woman struggling with a suitcase. He jumped up immediately, rushed to her, and pulled the suitcase to her destination, which was blocks and blocks away. He was a magnet for children and babies. They adored him. He adored them back. Rome, the eternal city, was his touchstone. He loved snow and walking in the snow. Upon the first snowfall in New York City, he would tell me to put on my coat and hat, and then he ushered me out to Riverside Park so that we could be a part of the beauty and magic of it all. Finally, he yearned for God. This was evident in his reading, conversation, writing, and in the way he walked on this earth, with humility, reverence, and love. Thank you.
Well, that was wonderful. You've been listening to a celebration of Oscar-Hijuelos. His novels, Our House in the Last World, The Mambo Kings Play Songs of Love, and Mr. Ives' Christmas are gathered in a new collection, volume number 362, in the Library of America series, edited by Laurie Carlson-Hijuelos and Laura Alonso-Gallo. Please join us for more online events from Library of America. On Wednesday, October 19th, it's Lying and Politics, the relevance of Hannah Arendt, an exploration of the brilliance and prescience of the great 20th century political philosopher, with Yale's David Bromwich, Roger Berkowitz from Bard College, and Selah Ben Habib from Columbia Law School. And in November, we mark Jack Kerouac's centenary with The Unknown Kerouac. Is the All-American Kerouac best understood as an immigrant writer? Join LOA Kerouac editor Todd Teachin and Quebecois scholar Jean-Christophe Cloutier for a conversation about Kerouac's French-Canadian roots and their connections with his later masterpieces. Readings by actor Bill Heck of the Coen brothers' Ballad of Lester Scruggs, the TV series The Old Man, and the forthcoming Broadway production Take Me Out. For details on these and other events, please check our website, loa.org/events, where you'll also find information about the Oscar-Hijuelos, Hannah Arendt, and Jack Kerouac volumes, and links to purchase those and other editions of Great American Writing. You'll also find recordings of tonight's and previous LOA Live events. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart tonight's wonderful guests for their moving memories and wonderful readings. Thanks so much again to Laurie Anderson, Junot Díaz, Gay Talese, Mary Gordon, Laura Alonso-Gallo, Arturo O'Farrell, and Laurie Carlson-Hijuelos. Thank you so much for coming tonight and joining us, and have a terrific evening.